The first time humanity saved the Galactic Council. They weren't even invited. And the first time they doomed an empire, they did it as allies. That was the problem. Not that humans were weak. Not that they were reckless. But that no one could predict which version of humanity would show up. My name is Kelthros Var. For 19 cycles, I have evaluated interstellar alliances for the Galactic Council. I have studied hive minds, warrior cults, trade syndicates, even telepathic collectives that negotiate wars before they begin. All of them follow patterns. Humans do not. 3 months ago, the Carity Empire, mid-tier military power, proud and territorial, signed a mutual defense pact with Earth. 6 weeks later, a border war that had dragged on for 4 years ended in 18 days.
18.
The Threxian clans, a species bred for siege warfare, surrendered sectors they had sworn to die for. No superweapon. No forbidden technology. No council intervention. Just humans. That alone triggered an investigation. But what happened next is why I am speaking now. Because 2 weeks after that victory, the Carity capital burned, and humanity was standing beside them when it did. I reviewed the battle data, personally. Human advisors had restructured Carity fleets using what they called asymmetric unpredictability. Smaller ships, independent command clusters, decentralized decision authority. The Carity resisted at first. Humans insisted. The result? The Threxians couldn't adapt fast enough.
Victory.
But victory created something more dangerous than war. Confidence. The Carity High Command began relying on human tactical projections for everything. Defense, diplomacy, internal security. And that is where the fracture began. Because humans don't just fight wars differently. They define enemies differently. I scheduled a direct inquiry with Ambassador Elena Rao, Earth's chief delegate. She arrived precisely on time. No guards. No theatrics. She carried a ceramic mug.
Steam rising.
Humans and their stimulants. She smiled as she sat across from me. You're trying to decide if we're a threat, she said calmly. I am determining risk variables, I corrected. She leaned back slightly. You're asking the wrong question. And what question should I be asking? She took a slow sip before answering. Not whether humans are dangerous. A pause. But who we decide deserves protection. That answer should have reassured me. It did not. Because during the Carity uprising, yes, uprising, not invasion, the humans did not assist their allies in suppressing civilian resistance. They assisted the civilians. Despite treaty obligations. Despite strategic consequences. Despite knowing it would fracture the alliance. When I confronted Ambassador Rao with this contradiction, she did not deny it. They were our allies, I said. So were the civilians, she replied. That was the moment I understood the scale of the problem. Humans will fight like demons for you, until you become the villain. And then, they will fight like demons against you. The Council wanted to know if humanity was the best ally in the galaxy. The real question was far more dangerous. What happens when the Council itself makes the wrong choice? And why? Have 3 Council members just requested human defense advisors? 3 Council members requested human defense advisors. That should have been a diplomatic footnote. Instead, it triggered a panic. Because the last species that relied too heavily on human assistance no longer controlled its own destiny. The official narrative about the Carity capital was simple. Internal unrest escalated beyond control. The classified version was not. When protests erupted across Carity Prime, the High Command labeled the civilians destabilizing elements. Curfews were imposed. Communications restricted. Armed patrols deployed. Standard procedure. But humans do not see unrest as a variable to suppress. They see it as data. And human advisors embedded in Carity security networks began asking questions no one else did. Why were food shipments delayed to protest-heavy districts? Why were resource allocations favoring military zones? Why were intelligence summaries omitting civilian casualty projections? Small inconsistencies. But humans specialize in patterns. And when they recognized one, they moved. Ambassador Rao didn't deny it when I pressed her. You rerouted humanitarian convoys without Carity authorization. Yes. You transmitted protest footage to independent media channels. Yes. You advised civilian leaders on defensive coordination tactics. Her expression didn't change. Yes. I felt my pulse spike, a biological reaction my species rarely experiences. You undermined your own allies. She leaned forward slightly.
No.
We honored our values. There it was again. Values. An unquantifiable metric that humans treat as strategic doctrine. When the Carity government ordered the arrest of human advisors, something unexpected happened. The Carity Third Fleet refused. Because those fleets had been restructured by humans. Decentralized command meant captains had autonomy. Autonomy meant conscience. And conscience meant hesitation. In 18 hours, half the fleet declared neutrality. In 24, a ceasefire was brokered. In 48, the High Chancellor resigned. The capital did not burn from invasion. It burned from revelation. And humanity stood in the fire, not as conquerors, as catalysts. The council chambers erupted when the full report was delivered. They destabilize governments. They override sovereign command. They weaponize morality. All accurate, but incomplete, because alongside the chaos came something else. Reconstruction. Within weeks, human advisors helped draft new Carity civic frameworks, balanced resource grids, transparent defense councils. The Carity economy stabilized faster than projections predicted. Their military effectiveness improved. Their public trust metrics doubled. They were stronger and utterly transformed. That transformation is what terrifies the Council. Because humans do not join alliances to maintain the status quo. They join to improve it. And improvement is rarely comfortable. I requested a second interview with Ambassador Rao. This time, I asked a different question. If the Council were to violate the principles your species considers fundamental, what would you do? She did not hesitate. We would try to fix it. And if we resisted, a brief silence. Then very softly. Then we'd still try. That was not a threat. That was certainty. And certainty, when paired with human persistence, becomes unstoppable. The Council believes it can control humanity through treaties. The Carity believed the same. Both were wrong. Because humans don't measure loyalty by contract length. They measure it by alignment. And alignment can shift. 3 council members want human advisors. 2 others want sanctions against Earth. The vote is in 72 hours. If humanity joins the Council's inner defense circle, they will become its greatest asset, or its greatest correction. And I am beginning to suspect the humans already know which outcome is coming. 72 hours before the vote, the Threxian clans attacked again. Not the Carity, the Council itself. And they did it with human tactics. The first strike wasn't military. It was economic. Trade routes rerouted. Energy futures destabilized. Information leaks timed with surgical precision. Within 12 hours, 3 council economies were in controlled freefall. Then came the military probe.
Fast.
Decentralized. Swarm formations instead of traditional battle lines. Exactly the doctrine humans had introduced to the Carity. The Council panicked. They've adapted. No. I corrected quietly. They've learned. That distinction mattered. Because learning human strategy is dangerous. Understanding human strategy is worse. Emergency session convened. Ambassador Rao sat calmly, while council representatives argued over defensive protocols. You trained the Carity in this doctrine, one member accused. Yes. And now it's being used against us. Yes. You destabilized the balance. Her eyes sharpened slightly.
No.
You assumed you were outside the equation. The room fell silent. Because that was the flaw. The Council believed humans were tools. But humans do not function as tools. They function as force multipliers for whoever aligns with them. And the Threxians had been watching. Intelligence confirmed something chilling. The Threxian High War Council had studied every public human military broadcast for months. They had dissected asymmetric warfare models. simulated decentralized command, even adopted human-style battlefield improvisation. They didn't ally with humans. They reverse-engineered them. And they were good. Council fleets began suffering early defeats in peripheral systems. Not catastrophic, but humiliating. For the first time in 2 centuries, the Council was reacting instead of predicting. And prediction is their entire identity. I confronted Ambassador Rao privately. You have created a strategic ecosystem where your methods proliferate beyond your control. She nodded. Yes. You anticipated this. Yes. My composure cracked for a moment. Why would you empower potential enemies? She set her mug down slowly. Because suppression breeds stagnation. Competition breeds evolution. That is reckless. No, she said quietly. It's honest. Here is what the Council finally understood. Humans don't just win wars. They change the rules of them. And once the rules change, everyone must adapt, including humanity. As Threxian forces pushed deeper using modified human doctrine, something unexpected occurred. Carity fleets, now politically independent but strategically aligned with Earth, intervened voluntarily. Not because of treaty obligation, but because they chose to. Human advisors did not command them. They coordinated, shared data, distributed decision authority across species. And for the first time, a multi-species fleet operated without centralized control. It was chaotic, imperfect, terrifying, and devastatingly effective. The Threxian offensive stalled within 40 hours. The Council vote was still 2 days away. But the question had shifted. Not whether humans were dangerous. That was settled. The real question now. If the Council rejects humanity, who will they align with next? Because humans don't stop innovating. They don't stop teaching. And they don't stop choosing sides. The Threxians adapted human tactics. The Carity embraced human values. But what happens when humanity decides the Council itself needs restructuring? And what if they're already preparing for that outcome? The vote was supposed to decide humanity's place in the Council. Instead, humanity forced the Council to decide what it stood for. 48 hours before the final session, a classified transmission leaked across secure Council channels. Origin, Earth. Authorization, public release. Attached were 27 data packets. Evidence of corruption. Selective sanctions targeting weaker member worlds. Resource manipulation disguised as stability initiatives. Military deployments labeled as peacekeeping but designed for political leverage. The data wasn't fabricated. That's what made it devastating. And it was formatted in perfect Council legal structure. Humans hadn't exposed the Council emotionally. They'd exposed it procedurally. Emergency, debate erupted. You have violated diplomatic protocol, one delegate shouted during a live session. Ambassador Rao remained composed.
No.
We followed your transparency statutes exactly. You weaponized our own governance framework. Yes. The word echoed.
Come.
Unapologetic. I felt something unfamiliar stir beneath my analytical conditioning. Respect.
And fear.
Outside the chamber, protests ignited across Council Station Apex. Not violent.
Organized.
Multi-species. Carity banners flew beside human insignias. Even smaller client worlds, normally silent, publicly demanded reform. And here was the most dangerous detail. Humans weren't leading the protests. They were advising from the edges, providing structure, communication networks, crisis de-escalation guides. They weren't overthrowing the system. They were teaching it how to fix itself. That distinction terrified half the Council. I requested one final private audience with Ambassador Rao before the vote. You are destabilizing centuries of political architecture. She considered that. Yes. And if the Council fractures?
It won't, she replied.
How can you be certain? Because most of you don't want to be tyrants. You're just afraid of losing control. That statement hit harder than any accusation. Because it wasn't an attack. It was insight. The final vote convened under unprecedented scrutiny. Security fleets stationed outside. Civilian observation feeds active across hundreds of systems. Human delegates silent. The proposal had evolved. It was no longer simply about granting humanity inner defense status. It now included structural reforms, shared transparency mandates, decentralized emergency response authority, cross-species oversight committees. Human fingerprints were everywhere. But no human signature appeared on the document. That was deliberate. They weren't claiming power. They were distributing it. The vote concluded. Approval margin: 62%. Humanity granted Inner Defense Partnership status. Council Governance Reform Initiative activated simultaneously. Half the chamber exhaled in relief. The other half in dread. Because they understood what had just happened. The Council had not absorbed humanity. Humanity had redefined the Council. After the session, I stood beside Ambassador Rao overlooking the station's luminous core. "You have achieved what no species has in 1,000 cycles," I said. "Which part?" she asked softly. "Influencing the Council without conquering it." She looked out at the stars. "We don't conquer systems," she replied. "We invest in futures." But as celebrations spread across aligned sectors, deep space sensors detected something else. Encrypted Threxian communications. Fragmented.
Desperate.
And within them, a single phrase repeated: "If humans choose the Council, we must become what they cannot." I analyzed that transmission 12 times. Each time, it led to the same conclusion. The Threxians were not planning retaliation. They were planning transformation. And when enemies start copying not just your tactics, but your philosophy, the balance shifts again. The Council believes the crisis is over. I am certain it has only escalated. Because humanity has now committed publicly to one side. And history suggests, when humans commit, they finish what they start. The Threxians did not retaliate. They reformed. And somehow that was worse. 3 months after the Council vote, Threxian border fleets withdrew from contested sectors. Not under pressure. Voluntarily. Encrypted messages were transmitted to Council channels. Open invitations for diplomatic dialogue. No ultimatums. No threats. Just a single proposal. Mutual Evolution Accord. The Council hesitated. Of course they did. The Threxians were historically expansionist. Territorial. Brutal in siege warfare. But intelligence confirmed internal restructuring. Distributed command trials. Civil advisory bodies. Even astonishingly public debate forums. They were studying humanity's blueprint.
And adapting it.
I requested analysis access to intercepted Threxian leadership discussions. One statement stood out. "If humans can weaponize empathy, then empathy is a weapon worth mastering." That sentence unsettled me. Because empathy in human hands had proven transformative. In Threxian hands? Unpredictable. The Council faced a paradox. Humanity had become the stabilizing force of the region. Their alliances were durable because they weren't transactional. They were conditional on shared principles. But now former adversaries wanted access to that same model. If the Council rejected the Threxian proposal, it would contradict the very reforms humanity had just inspired. If they accepted it, they would be betting the galaxy on the idea that even conquerors can evolve. And that idea came from Earth. I met Ambassador Rao one last time before the Council's response. "Your species has altered geopolitical gravity," I told her. She smiled faintly. "That was always the plan." "You anticipated the Threxians would adapt." "Yes. And if they misuse what they learn?" She held my gaze. "Then we'll confront them. Together." There was no arrogance in her voice. Just resolve. The Council voted again. This time, unanimously. The Mutual Evolution Accord passed. Not because the Threxians were trusted, but because humanity had proven something revolutionary. An ally isn't defined by perfection. It's defined by direction. The Threxians would be monitored, integrated gradually, bound by transparency statutes shaped in part by human advisors. The galaxy shifted, not toward dominance, but toward accountability. Months later, I stood in a joint training facility, Council, Carity, Threxian, and human officers sharing command simulations. Arguments erupted constantly. Strategy debates, ethical disputes, cultural clashes. And yet the simulations showed something extraordinary. Combined fleets adapting faster than any single species ever had. Mistakes corrected mid-conflict. Civilian risk metrics prioritized without compromising tactical efficiency. Human influence was everywhere. Not controlling. Connecting. I compiled my final report to the Galactic Council. Conclusion. Humanity represents both the greatest stabilizing asset and the most disruptive variable in recorded interstellar history. They will elevate their allies. They will expose their corruption. They will challenge complacency. They will defend fiercely. And they will turn against you if you betray the principles they believe in. In other words, they are exactly the allies this galaxy needs. And exactly the allies tyrants fear. As I finalized the transmission, a private message from Ambassador Rao appeared on my console. "You finally understand us?" I replied. "Not entirely."
A pause.
"But I understand this. When humans stand beside you, the future becomes harder. Harder to dominate, harder to corrupt, harder to predict." Another pause. "And far harder to destroy." Her response came moments later. "Good." The Council once asked whether humanity was a strategic asset or a systemic threat. The answer is simpler. Humans are a catalyst. And once you invite a catalyst into your system, you will never remain the same. The galaxy has chosen evolution because the best allies in existence are also the ones who refuse to let you stay your worst.